The first presidential debate is June 27th, but candidates have until this Thursday to qualify for it. Now, in terms of getting on state ballots, in the case of independent candidate RFK Jr., his campaign insists they have the needed signatures for several states, but they've typically been waiting until the last minute to submit them. Campaign spokesman Del Bigtree explained to this podcast a few weeks ago why.
Our strategy is to hold on. In many states, we're holding signatures as we speak. In fact, we've got 8 states ready to go, but as soon as you turn them in, then they come under attack by those that are going to try and strike them down.
Qualifying for next week's CNN debate means a candidate must have received 15% in 4 national polls and be on the ballot in enough states to get 270 electoral college votes. It's not impossible, but it is growing less and less likely. While the Biden campaign has held events with members of the Kennedy family who back the president rather than Robert F. Kennedy Jr., former President Trump's campaign spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt has said he'd be happy to debate RFK.
This guy is as far left as you could get, especially on the issue of energy, which is the number one reason that prices in this country have soared.
Fox News reports RFK Jr.'s qualified for the ballot in just 6 states so far, even if the campaign has the signatures to eventually qualify in more. Real Clear polling has RFK Jr.'s unfavorable rating at just over 43%. That's 8 points higher than his favorable rating. And the last Fox News polls of swing states have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. coming in with 8% in Arizona, 7% in Nevada, just 7% in Florida, and 9% in Virginia.
The hard part now will be within 4 weeks, we'll have all the signatures that we need to be on the ballot in every state.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is an independent candidate for president.
That was something that people said we could not do, and it's clear that we're going to accomplish it. The polling, I think, show us in single digits. Every poll we've seen that shows us in single digits use a deceptive methodology. And what they do is they ask the subjects whether they favor Biden or Trump or other. And if they select other, then they're sent to a different field where they're given a choice between me and Cornel West and Jill Stein. And that's not a conventional way to take a poll. The conventional way would be to ask the subjects the same question that they would see when they get into the voting booth. And when they do that, my polling comes up between 15% and 25%. So it's hard, I can't assess the polls that you're talking about without actually, looking at the crosstabs. We've seen a number of the big polling companies adopt that methodology over the past 3 months, and consistently they drop my poll to single digits. When the polling company does it both ways, as Quinnipiac did, I poll in single digits when they use the deceptive methodology, and poll in double digits, high teens, low 20s, when they ask the poll the conventional way.
I wanted to get your reaction to. I saw some people in New York are suing you. 2 people who say that the signatures your campaign gathered, they say they're invalid for various reasons. But these 2 people are backed by the DNC. And I'm just wondering if you care to respond to that and to the DNC being involved.
The DNC, we expect the DNC is $3 billion. So, and they've deployed a lot of that money to trying to keep me off the ballot. We expect them to bring litigation in many states, if not all the states. Every lawsuit they brought today, we have beaten them on. We think these are specious lawsuits that have no chance of succeeding. We were required to get 45,000 signatures in New York. We got 137,000. The DNC tried to sabotage us by deploying a contract company that actually was fraudulently collecting signatures. They collected about 37,000 signatures with easily discernible fraud, and we fired that company and we threw out their signatures. We got 137,000 signatures from our volunteers and from other paid vendors, and they're, any challenge those signatures is going to fail.
Somehow in this campaign, you found the time to make this documentary, Recovering America, and it's focusing on something that, we should all be talking about. A lot of us are talking about it, the overdose crisis, drug addiction. I specifically have heard you talk about a lack of community. I don't know if that was in reference to addiction, but I wanted your thoughts on how this crisis intersects with our communities, or a lack of community in many cases.
Yeah, I mean, particularly with the younger generation, Gen X, the millennials, they're growing up in a completely different world and environment than I grew up in. They're growing up with social media. They're growing up with a completely different expectations from their country. In 2013, there was a poll taken of American young people under 35 years of age. And they were asked one question: are you proud of the United States? And 85% said yes. The same poll taken 5 months ago of under 35s, only 18% said yes. So you have 82% of young people who say that they're not proud of our country, and they have very little hope for their future, and they feel like the American dream has been the promise of the American dream is a broken promise. They're not going to be able to afford a home. They're going to live lives that are very diminished from the lives that their parents lived. Suicide is the second highest cause of death now in that generation. And the fentanyl crisis and drug overdoses killed 106,000 of them, about double just in 1 year. Last year, double the number of kids that were killed, American kids, during the 20-year Vietnam War. The underlying crisis, the crisis of alienation, of dashed expectations, of hopelessness, of dispossession, of marginalization, and a complete separation from community. Yeah. And one of the programs that I'm going to initiate, that's going to be my Peace Corps program, is to establish rural farms, wellness farms, and recovery farms in rural areas all over this country. The biggest industry in rural areas now is prisons. And I'm going to change that and put these recovery farms all over the country where there will be no screens. So the social media, people will actually have to talk to each other. There'll be no PCs, no telephones. They will grow organic food, good, high-quality food, and they will learn a trade.
Kennedy's solution to the overdose and drug crisis comes from the mind of a former addict. He himself used heroin for years following his father's death and is still active in recovery. Now, while healing centers where one can farm and garden might work, they also might take a bit of time to get going. Meanwhile, many of the drugs fueling our addiction crisis come to us from Mexico, especially fentanyl. And when it comes to the border, Kennedy's position has evolved into a tougher one.
I would close the border overnight. I secure the border overnight. I think we need to have a humanitarian, compassionate immigration policy that reflects our values. But that means people coming in legally, waiting in line, and I think we should have wider gates, that we should have an easier path to citizenship for people who come in legally. But a country can't survive if it does not have secure borders. And right now, the border policy is being run by the Sinaloan drug cartels, and they're advertising on YouTube. I've spent a lot of time at the border. I watch. And on one of my visits between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., 300 people walk across the border, brought there by buses, 55 people in a bus. These brand new, beautiful buses that are owned by the drug cartels. People were coming from, the first 110 people who came across were all young men from West Africa, military age.
Wow.
I interviewed the next two buses, so about 110 people, and they were all from Asia with two exceptions. There was one family from Colombia, one from Peru. Those are the only Latin Americans I saw all night. The Sinaloa drug cartel is advertising on YouTube and TikTok all over the world, and you pay $10,000 and they guarantee you they can get you into our country. And the people who come across, many of them have been robbed, they've been raped, they've been brutalized, beaten, extorted by the cartels. Anybody who thinks that this is a humanitarian enterprise is wrong. And then the Border Patrol has been asked not to do its job, but to transport all of these new immigrants undocumented, to give them each one an asylum court date that's 7 years in the future, and then bring them to the Yuma airport and put them on an airplane to any destination they want in the United States. And if they don't have the money, which many of them don't because they've been robbed by the cartels on their way over, and the Border Patrol pays for their ticket and gets reimbursement from FEMA, it's literally the most insane thing I've seen a government do in my lifetime. And, these undocumented aliens are crushing the social safety net in our cities. The social service systems are overwhelmed. I toured a rape center in Utah, which specializes in young kids being raped, because there's so many coming over who've been raped by the cartels and victimized by predators. I also went to local hospitals. The beds in the maternity ward were 100% filled with immigrants, and the local people could not get into those beds to have induced births and to get pregnancy services.
Wow.
So, and Yuma is a border town, and it is getting destroyed by this. The kindest people in the world there are very, very proud of the Americans who are meeting these and meeting these new immigrants with compassion. But it's unfair to them, and now every city in our country is now a border town because the number of immigrants coming across it's destructive for our country. And I'll end it overnight. I'm going to send 300 asylum court judges to the border. I'm going to hire 2,000 new Border Patrol, and I'm going to improve the morale on the Border Patrol by allowing them to actually do their job. I'm going to end the catch and release program. I'm going to restate the Migrant Protection Act, which requires individuals who come from other countries to Mexico with asylum claims seeking to get to the United States, that they adjudicate those claims in Mexico, not in our country. And I'm going to fix the fences. I'm going to plug the 27 gaps in the wall, and we're going to do it very, very quickly. And then I'm going to issue passport cards to all Americans who can't afford them. So you can go to your post office, you can get a federally issued photo ID, and you won't be able to work in this country without that ID. The ID is not going to have your medical records. It won't have any other of your information.
Wow.
But we need a federal ID. We need government issued ID that's easily attainable. So that everybody in this country can have ID. Everybody can show ID in a voting booth. Everybody can show ID to get a job. And you won't, right now it's illegal for employers to employ undocumented aliens. But there's a loophole, which is the only thing they have to show is a Social Security card. And Social Security cards are absolutely simple to fabricate. They have no photo on them. They're passed hand to hand at work sites in New York, for example, construction sites. And the employees are then paid in cash. And the employer is not liable because he says he saw the Social Security card.
Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.